Prince Harry may soon forget the people he loves most, even Meghan and their children, as doctors deliver a devastating diagnosis that's left the world in shock. In a heartbreaking turn of events, Harry is reportedly battling a rare and aggressive brain condition that's erasing his memories faster than anyone imagined. Sources say Meghan, in tears, whispered to close friends, "He won't make it." Doctors warn the disease is attacking Harry's mind at a terrifying pace, and in an emotional emergency meeting, they revealed the Duke of Sussex could lose all recognition of his family within weeks. But there's more. The royal family's reaction, the global outpouring of support, and Meghan's quiet preparations to say goodbye are sending shockwaves far beyond Montecito. What really happened in that hospital room? And what did Harry say in his final lucid moments that left Meghan utterly shattered? Stay with us. This is the story you can't afford to miss. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. The room was silent except for the faint hum of medical machines. Prince Harry lay motionless on the hospital bed, his eyes half open but distant, as though staring into a world no one else could see. Doctors and nurses moved quietly around him, their faces painted with the kind of controlled calm that masks quiet urgency. Meghan sat at his side, clutching his hand with both of hers, whispering his name again and again, as if the sound alone could pull him back. But Harry's fingers didn't tighten around hers. They stayed limp, his once bright blue eyes clouded with confusion. "Do you know who I am, Harry?" she asked softly, her voice breaking as she brushed a tear from his cheek. There was a long pause. Then he spoke, barely audible. "You look familiar." Those 3 words shattered Meghan. Hours earlier, the doctors had delivered the devastating news. Harry's brain was under siege from an aggressive neurological disease. In medical terms, it was called frontotemporal dementia, but the doctors put it bluntly, his memory was being erased, piece by piece, like ink bleeding off a page in the rain. He may not recognize his wife or children in a matter of weeks, one physician warned. And after that, he will forget himself. For Meghan, the words felt like a death sentence, not just for Harry's mind, but for the man she knew, the man she loved. She had always feared losing him to the relentless media storms or to the emotional scars left by his family. But this was something she could not fight, no matter how hard she tried. Back at the Montecito estate, their 2 children, Archie and Lilibet, were blissfully unaware. Archie had been asking, "When is Daddy coming home?" Lilibet, too young to understand, clutched her doll and sang nursery rhymes. Meghan knew she couldn't shield them from the truth forever. News of Harry's diagnosis swept through the royal family like wildfire. In Buckingham Palace, King Charles reportedly collapsed into a chair when he heard the news. "I thought there would still be time to fix things between us," he told aides, according to palace sources. "But I may never have the chance now." Prince William's reaction was even more visceral. He was said to have locked himself in his private study, weeping for hours. A close friend of William revealed, he kept whispering, "He was still my brother. No matter what happened, he was still my brother." It was an earthquake that shook not only the royal family but also the entire world. Prince Harry, the once vibrant soldier, the rebellious young prince who had fought to carve his own path, was now fighting a battle he could never win. At the hospital, Meghan had been holding back tears for hours, but she couldn't any longer. She excused herself and stepped out into the cold night air, her legs buckling under the weight of despair. She pressed her phone to her ear and called her mother. "Mama," she whispered, "I don't know what to do. He's slipping away from me. I think this is the end." On the other end of the line, Doria Raglan tried to soothe her daughter, but even she could hear the hollow sound in Meghan's voice. The sound of someone preparing to say goodbye. The doctors were clear. Harry's condition had no cure. Treatments could slow the progression for a few months, maybe a year if they were lucky, but the outcome was inevitable. And so Meghan began making quiet preparations. She called a lawyer to discuss Harry's wishes. She met with a priest to arrange for private blessings. And in the darkest hours of the night, she sat by Harry's bed, holding a pen and notebook, scribbling down every lucid word he said, trying to capture the last fragments of a mind that was fading fast. At one point, Harry looked at her, his brow furrowed. "Promise me," he murmured. "Anything, Harry. Just say it. Don't let them bury me near them. I don't want to be there. Not near them." Meghan's eyes widened. "Harry, don't say that." But he only closed his eyes, whispering as though to himself, "Too much pain, too many ghosts." The next morning, as the sun rose over Los Angeles, Meghan issued a brief statement to the press. My husband is gravely ill. We are asking for privacy during this devastating time as we focus on his care and on our children. But behind those carefully chosen words was a woman who knew she was watching the man she loved disappear day by day. In private, Meghan turned to her closest friend and said something that would later send shockwaves around the world. He won't make it, and I have to prepare for that. This isn't just a story about a prince fighting for his life. It's about a woman standing in the eye of a storm, clinging to the man she loves as the world watches. And as Meghan Markle prepares to say goodbye, the question haunting everyone is this: will Prince Harry ever get the chance to reconcile with his family before his memory and his time runs out? Or will this be the final chapter of a story that began with fairy tale dreams and ends in heartbreak? The morning it all began seemed no different from any other in Montecito. Birds chirped softly outside the Sussex estate, the Pacific breeze carrying the scent of salt and eucalyptus through the open windows. Meghan Markle had woken up early, as she often did, to prepare breakfast for her two young children. Archie was sitting at the counter, chattering about a dream he had where he was flying a dragon, while Lilibet played on the floor with her stuffed animals. But there was an unease in the house. Meghan felt it in her chest, a tightness she couldn't shake. It wasn't until Harry stumbled into the kitchen, his hair tousled and eyes glassy, that the weight of that feeling came crashing down. "Good morning," she said gently, setting a plate of eggs in front of him. Harry blinked at her, confused. "Where am I?" he asked. His voice was strained, his accent oddly uneven. Meghan froze. "You're home, love," she replied cautiously. "In Montecito. With me. With the kids." Harry looked down at his hands, his brow furrowed deeply as if trying to piece something together. Archie jumped off his stool and ran toward his father. "Daddy, Daddy," he cried. Harry knelt down instinctively but hesitated before opening his arms. For a long, crushing moment, he stared at Archie with a vacant expression. Then he whispered under his breath, I don't know you." Meghan's heart shattered in that instant. She quickly ushered the children out of the room, her hands trembling. "Harry," she said, her voice quivering, "it's me. It's Meghan." Harry looked up at her, tears forming in his eyes. "I know your face," he murmured, "but I can't remember why it matters so much." Within an hour, Meghan had called the family physician. By the afternoon, Harry was admitted to a private hospital in Los Angeles, surrounded by a team of neurologists and specialists. The news spread to Buckingham Palace like wildfire. A palace aide reportedly found King Charles pacing the halls, clutching a handwritten letter from Harry. "It says, Dad, I don't want to fight anymore," Charles whispered to his staff. "He's reaching out, and I may be too late." Prince William, meanwhile, was said to have broken down in his private quarters at Windsor. Sources close to the future king revealed he kept repeating the same phrase over and over. "He was still my brother. No matter what happened, he was still my brother." Royal watchers and the global media speculated wildly. Was this the moment that would heal the rift in the House of Windsor? Or was it the beginning of an even deeper tragedy? At the hospital, Meghan sat beside Harry's bed as specialists delivered their diagnosis: frontotemporal dementia, a rare and aggressive neurological disease. It attacks the parts of the brain responsible for memory and emotional regulation. The lead doctor explained gravely, "We are seeing rapid degeneration. If the progression continues at this pace, your husband may not recognize his family in a matter of weeks." Meghan's knuckles whitened as she gripped the chair's armrests. "Is there any hope?" she asked, her voice breaking. The doctor hesitated. "We can attempt treatments to slow the progression, but there is no cure. In time, his memories, his entire personality, may fade." Meghan turned her face away, biting her lip until it bled. As Harry dozed, Meghan scrolled through old photos on her phone. Their wedding day, Harry holding newborn Archie, family hikes in California. She couldn't reconcile the man lying in the hospital bed with the vibrant, mischievous prince she had married. A nurse entered quietly. "He had a moment of lucidity earlier," she whispered. Meghan's head shot up. "What did he say?" The nurse's eyes softened with pity. "He asked if he could go home to Diana." Meghan felt her heart twist. That night, Harry stirred awake and looked at Meghan with rare clarity. "Promise me," he whispered. "Anything, Harry," she replied quickly, leaning in close. "Don't let them bury me near them. I don't want to be there. Not near them." Tears streamed down Meghan's cheeks. "You're not going anywhere," she said fiercely, though her voice trembled. But Harry only closed his eyes again, murmuring softly, "Too much pain. Too many ghosts. Outside the hospital, camera flashes lit up the darkness. Reporters shouted questions at Meghan as she emerged, her face pale and drawn. Meghan, how is Harry? Is it true he doesn't remember you? Has the royal family reached out? Meghan didn't answer. She slid into the waiting SUV and stared straight ahead, her hands clenched tightly in her lap. Inside her mind, one thought screamed louder than all the others. He's slipping away, and I can't stop it. This was the day everything changed, not just for Harry and Meghan, but for the royal family and for the millions around the world who had watched their love story unfold. And as Meghan prepared to face the darkest chapter of her life, one question lingered in the air. Would Prince Harry get the chance to reconcile with his family before the disease took him completely? Or was this the beginning of a goodbye that had come far too soon? The room felt colder than usual, though it wasn't the air conditioning. It was the atmosphere, a thick, unspoken tension clinging to every corner. The emergency meeting had been hastily arranged in a secure wing of the private hospital. Meghan sat rigid in her chair, her knuckles white as she gripped the armrests. Across from her, 3 of the top neurologists in the country shuffled papers and exchanged grave looks. A 4th doctor, flown in from Switzerland just hours earlier, stood by a lightboard displaying Harry's brain scans. On the screen, dark patches modeled the image of Harry's frontal lobe like shadows creeping across a map. This, the lead doctor said, gesturing to the illuminated scan, is what we're dealing with. Rapid and aggressive degeneration of the brain's frontal and temporal regions. Memory, behavior, language, and even emotional control. These areas are being compromised faster than we anticipated. Meghan felt her stomach twist. She wanted to scream, to tell them they had to be wrong. But the evidence was staring her in the face, undeniable and merciless. How long? She asked hoarsely. The room fell silent. Finally, the Swiss neurologist spoke. Given the rate of progression, we estimate that within 6 to 8 weeks, your husband may not recognize his family. Beyond that, it's difficult to say. In similar cases, patients often lose the ability to speak and perform basic functions. Meghan pressed her fingers to her mouth to stifle a sob. What about treatments? Trials? Experimental therapies? There are options, the doctor replied carefully. But you must understand, none will reverse the damage already done. At best, we can slow the progression, but even that is not guaranteed. The meeting continued for over an hour as doctors detailed the prognosis. Each word felt like another stone piled onto Meghan's chest. She thought back to the Harry she had met all those years ago, the cheeky grin, the infectious laugh, the man who had fought to protect her from the storm of royal life. She couldn't reconcile that vibrant man with the pale figure lying in the hospital bed down the hall. When the doctors finally filed out, Meghan stayed seated, staring at the empty chairs around her. She barely noticed when the door opened and Doria Raglan stepped in. "Sweetheart," her mother said gently, laying a hand on Meghan's shoulder. Meghan turned, her face streaked with tears. "They said he's going to forget us," she whispered. "He's going to forget me, and the kids." Doria knelt beside her, holding her tightly. "You're stronger than you know," Doria murmured. "And Harry, he loves you. That doesn't go away, not really. Not in here." She placed a hand over Meghan's heart. As the sun began to set, Meghan walked back to Harry's room. She paused outside the door, listening. Inside, she heard a faint murmur. "Mummy? Mummy, is that you?" Meghan's breath caught. She pushed the door open to see Harry staring blankly at the ceiling, his lips moving slowly. She stepped closer. "Harry, it's me. It's Meghan." Harry turned his head, his eyes cloudy with confusion. "You're not Diana," he said softly. Meghan felt a sharp pang in her chest. "No, I'm not," she replied, forcing a small smile. "But I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere." Harry's expression softened briefly. Then, like a flame snuffed out, the recognition faded from his eyes. Meanwhile, 5,000 miles away in London, Buckingham Palace was reeling. King Charles had convened his own emergency meeting with senior advisors. He paced back and forth in the drawing room, clutching a letter from Meghan. "She says he's slipping fast," Charles said, his voice low and strained. "She's asking if the family would consider visiting." An aide cleared his throat nervously. "Your Majesty, given the circumstances, perhaps it's time." Charles turned sharply. "Time for what?" he snapped. "To admit that I failed my own son? That I let the rift between us grow so wide he may not even remember who I am?" No one answered. In Windsor, William sat alone in his study. A photograph of him and Harry from their teenage years sat on the desk in front of him. He picked it up, tracing the edges with his thumb. A single tear rolled down his cheek. "I thought we had time," he whispered to himself. "I thought there was time to fix it all." An advisor knocked gently at the door. "Sir, Meghan has requested a private call with you." William hesitated. Then, with a heavy sigh, he set the photo down. "Put it through." Back in California, Meghan held Harry's hand, watching his chest rise and fall with shallow breaths. "I spoke to your brother today," she whispered. "He wants to come. They all want to come." Harry's eyes fluttered open for a moment. "They remember me?" he murmured. "Of course they do," Meghan said quickly. "You're unforgettable." Harry smiled faintly. "I hope. I remember them." This emergency meeting would mark the beginning of a series of life-changing decisions, not just for Harry and Meghan, but for the entire royal family. What happened in the coming days would test old wounds, strained loyalties, and the strength of a family torn apart by years of conflict. And as Meghan sat in the darkness that night, watching over Harry, one thought echoed in her mind. How do you say goodbye to someone who hasn't even left yet? The moon hung high over Montecito, casting a pale light across the Sussex estate. Inside, the house was silent except for the faint sound of Meghan's muffled sobs echoing through the hall. She sat curled up on the edge of the bed in the guest room. She couldn't bear sleeping in the one she had shared with Harry. It smelled too much like him. The events of the last 48 hours had been relentless. The diagnosis, the doctor's warnings, the calls from Buckingham Palace. Meghan had barely eaten. Her hand shook as she scrolled through her phone, rereading the same text messages from Harry's doctors. Rapid decline. Neurological degeneration accelerating. Prepare for advanced memory loss. Every word felt like a dagger. Her phone buzzed again. It was a message from one of Harry's closest friends. "How's he doing tonight? Any better?" She stared at the screen for a long time before typing a reply. "No. He's fading. And I don't know how much longer he'll recognize me." She hit send and let the phone slide from her fingers onto the floor. Earlier that evening, Meghan had sat by Harry's hospital bed as he slept, his breathing shallow and uneven. She had been whispering softly to him, hoping her voice would reach through the fog that clouded his mind. "Do you remember when we first met?" she asked, tears welling in her eyes. "You said you knew I was the one from the first moment." Harry stirred slightly but didn't respond. "You fought for me," Meghan continued, clutching his hand. "You fought the world. And now it's my turn to fight for you." But deep down, she knew this was a battle she couldn't win. When Harry opened his eyes, Meghan leaned forward eagerly. "Harry, it's me," she said, forcing a smile. Harry squinted at her, his brow furrowing. "You look like someone I used to know," he murmured. Meghan's heart sank. "It's me, love. It's Meghan, your wife." For a moment, there was a flicker of recognition in his eyes. But then it was gone, like a candle snuffed out by the wind. "I'm sorry," he whispered. I can't remember." Meghan excused herself and stepped into the hallway. The moment the door closed behind her, she collapsed against the wall and let out a gut-wrenching sob. A nurse passing by paused, her eyes soft with sympathy. "Mrs. Markle, do you want me to call someone? Your mother, perhaps?" Meghan shook her head violently. "No, I don't want anyone to see me like this. I need to be strong for him." As the night wore on, Meghan returned to Harry's room. She watched him sleep, his once strong frame now fragile and still. "He won't make it," she thought bitterly. The words had slipped out of her mouth earlier in the day during a hushed phone call with her mother. She hated herself for saying them out loud, but deep down, she knew they were true. He won't make it. Not like this. She brushed a strand of hair from Harry's forehead and whispered, "I'm so sorry." Across the Atlantic, Prince William sat in his study, staring at his phone. Meghan's voice had sounded strained when they spoke earlier. "He's still here, but he's not the same," she had told him. "You need to come soon, before it's too late." William clenched his jaw, tears pricking his eyes. "I let it get this bad," he muttered under his breath. "I let him down." For years, there had been silence between the brothers, a chasm of hurt and misunderstanding. Now William wondered if there would ever be a chance to bridge it. Meanwhile, King Charles couldn't sleep. He sat alone in his private chamber at Buckingham Palace, clutching a photograph of Harry as a boy. "He was always the wild one," Charles whispered. "Always full of life. How did it come to this?" An aide entered quietly. "Your Majesty, the Duchess of Sussex has sent another update." Charles nodded grimly. "Read it to me." The aide hesitated. "It says, he's slipping away faster than we imagined. He doesn't even remember our children's names. Charles closed his eyes, feeling the weight of regret press down on him like never before. Back in Montecito, Meghan found herself replaying old memories in her mind. Harry laughing as he cooked breakfast, Harry carrying Archie on his shoulders during a hike, Harry whispering, "I'll love you forever," on their wedding day. Now, she was faced with the unbearable reality that he might not even remember those moments. As dawn broke, Meghan sat in the hospital room watching Harry sleep, her hands trembling as she wrote in a small leather journal. "If he forgets everything else, I want him to know this. He was loved. Fiercely, endlessly, and without condition. By me. By his children. By the world." She closed the journal and placed it in the drawer beside his bed. The doctors entered quietly for their morning rounds. Meghan stood to meet them, her eyes red from crying, but her posture straight and defiant. "What's the plan today?" she asked. One of the doctors sighed. "We're doing everything we can. But Mrs. Markle, it's time to start preparing for the possibility that his condition may reach a point where he no longer recognizes anyone." Meghan nodded silently, her jaw tightening. She refused to break, not in front of them. But deep inside, she felt like she was already mourning the man she loved, even though he was still breathing right in front of her. The world didn't know yet how bad things were. Meghan knew the media frenzy would begin soon enough. For now, she just wanted these last moments to herself. She leaned down, kissed Harry's forehead, and whispered, "I'll never stop loving you, no matter what you remember or what you forget." That night, as she walked out into the hospital courtyard to catch her breath, Meghan looked up at the stars and whispered to herself, "He won't make it. And I have to find a way to be okay with that." But even as she said it, her chest tightened, because the truth was, she didn't know if she ever could. The call came at dawn, as a pale gray light crept over the spires of Windsor Castle. Prince William had been awake all night, sitting in his private study, staring blankly at the crackling fire. He hadn't slept since Meghan's last message. The words replayed in his mind like a broken record. "Harry doesn't even remember Archie's name anymore." When the phone rang, William flinched. He let it buzz 3 times before answering. "This is William." Meghan's voice was quiet on the other end, brittle but determined. "It's worse today," she said. "The doctors, they don't think he'll hold on much longer." There was a long pause. William gripped the phone tighter, his knuckles turning white. "Has he asked for me?" he asked finally, his voice thick. There was silence. Then Meghan whispered, "No, but I think he wants to. Somewhere inside, I think he's still reaching for you." William closed his eyes, his chest tightening. "I'm coming," he said. "I don't care what it takes. I'll be there by tomorrow." At Buckingham Palace, King Charles sat alone in his private chamber. He hadn't spoken to anyone for hours, not even Queen Camilla. On the table before him lay a collection of Harry's childhood photographs. In one, a young Harry grinned mischievously, a smear of chocolate across his face. In another, he clutched Diana's hand tightly, looking up at her with wide, adoring eyes. "He's still my boy," Charles murmured, his voice cracking. "No matter what's happened, he's still my boy." A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. "Your Majesty?" came the voice of a senior aide. "What is it?" Charles asked curtly. "The Duchess of Sussex has sent an update. It's grave. Read it." The aide hesitated, then unfolded a piece of paper. "Harry's confusion is increasing. He struggled to recognize me this morning and became agitated when he couldn't remember where he was. The doctors have said we should prepare for the worst. He might not make it through the month." Charles bowed his head, tears slipping silently down his cheeks. "Prepare the jet," he said after a long pause. "We leave for California tonight." Back in California, Meghan sat at Harry's bedside, gently stroking his hand. His eyes were open but vacant, staring past her as if she were a stranger. "Harry," she said softly, forcing a smile. "Your father's coming. And William too. They want to see you." Harry blinked slowly. "Father," he murmured, his voice barely audible. "Yes," Meghan said, leaning closer. "Your father." But Harry's brow furrowed in confusion. "Did I do something wrong?" Meghan's heart broke. She shook her head quickly, tears brimming in her eyes. "No, love. You didn't do anything wrong." In Windsor, William paced frantically as aides prepared his travel arrangements. He felt a crushing weight in his chest, a gnawing regret that threatened to swallow him whole. "I should have called him sooner," he said to one of his confidants. "I should have fixed this before it was too late." The confidant placed a hand on his shoulder. "You still have time," he said gently. "But you need to go now." William nodded. I'm going to tell him. I forgive him. For everything. And I'll beg him to forgive me too. As Charles boarded the plane that night, he glanced out the window at the lights of London twinkling below. For the first time in decades, the monarch felt utterly powerless. He thought of all the missed chances, the arguments that had driven Harry further away. What kind of father lets this happen? He whispered to himself. An aide seated across from him looked down respectfully, saying nothing. The flight to California was long and silent. Both Charles and William sat lost in thought, their faces drawn and pale. When they landed in Los Angeles, a convoy of black SUVs whisked them straight to the hospital. The world's media had already begun to gather outside, their camera flashes lighting up the night like bursts of lightning. Inside, Meghan stood waiting in the corridor, her face pale and weary from days without sleep. "They're here," a nurse whispered. Meghan turned to see Charles and William approaching. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Charles stepped forward, his eyes glistening. "Meghan," he said hoarsely, "thank you for calling us." Meghan nodded, her voice cracking as she replied, "He's asking for you both. I think he's holding on just to see you." William entered Harry's room first. He froze in the doorway, his breath catching at the sight of his brother lying frail and still on the bed. Tubes and monitors surrounded him, the steady beeping of a heart monitor filling the silence. "Harry," William whispered. Harry stirred slightly, his eyes fluttering open. For a brief, fleeting moment, there was a spark of recognition. "Wills," he murmured. William rushed to his side, taking his hand. "Yes, Harry. It's me. I'm here." Harry smiled faintly. "I missed you, brother." William's tears fell freely as he whispered, "I missed you too. So much." Charles stepped forward next, his lips trembling. "Harry, it's your father," he said softly. Harry turned his head slightly, his gaze landing on Charles. "Dad," he whispered. Charles choked back a sob, clutching Harry's hand. "I'm here, son. I'm here now." For the first time in years, the three men, father and sons, were together. But even in this moment of fragile reconciliation, Meghan knew time was slipping away. As night fell over Los Angeles, the royal family gathered around Harry's bed, holding vigil. Outside, the world waited anxiously for updates, unaware that inside those hospital walls, centuries of royal pride and bitterness were dissolving into something far more powerful: love, forgiveness, and the desperate hope for one last chance. And as Harry drifted back to sleep, his hand still in William's, Meghan whispered to herself, "Maybe this is the healing he needed all along." The hospital room was dimly lit, save for the faint glow of monitors tracking Prince Harry's vitals. The steady beeping provided a fragile sense of normalcy, yet every flicker of his pulse on the screen felt like a countdown. Meghan sat quietly at his side, her fingers brushing lightly over his hand. She didn't dare let go, as if her touch alone could tether him to this world a little longer. Earlier that day, the team of neurologists had assembled in the consultation room. Meghan, William, and King Charles sat together for the first time in years, their collective anxiety palpable. "Your Royal Highnesses," the lead neurologist began, his tone clinical but tinged with quiet empathy, "we've confirmed the full extent of Prince Harry's condition. It is as we feared. He is suffering from frontotemporal dementia, an aggressive neurological disorder affecting the brain's frontal and temporal lobes." He paused, glancing briefly at Meghan. "This disease attacks areas responsible for personality, behavior, and language. But in Harry's case, it's progressing unusually fast. We've also observed signs of hippocampal atrophy, the part of the brain that governs memory." William leaned forward, his voice tight. "Are you saying my brother will forget everything?" The doctor nodded solemnly. "His ability to form and retrieve memories is being severely compromised. Soon, he may not recognize even those closest to him. Over time, he could lose the ability to speak, to understand language, even to care for himself." Charles let out a long, shaky breath. "Surely there's something you can do? A treatment, a surgery, anything." Another specialist, a renowned Swiss neurologist flown in for Harry's case, interjected. "There is no known cure for this condition. Some medications can manage behavioral symptoms or slow cognitive decline, but they cannot halt or reverse the disease's progression. In Harry's case, even these measures may offer limited benefit because of how advanced the degeneration appears to be." Meghan clenched her fists in her lap, fighting to keep her voice steady. "William, he's only 40. This doesn't happen to someone so young." "It is rare," the Swiss doctor agreed. But early-onset frontotemporal dementia can strike patients in their 30s and 40s. Genetic predisposition, combined with prolonged stress and trauma, may have played a role in accelerating the condition. Trauma? William asked sharply. The doctor nodded. Yes. Sustained emotional trauma can create neurological vulnerabilities. The brain and body are deeply connected. Years of psychological stress may have weakened Prince Harry's ability to withstand this illness. William turned his face away, his jaw tightening. Meghan noticed his hands trembling slightly. After the meeting, Meghan returned to Harry's room, trying to process the enormity of what she'd just heard. She found him awake, staring blankly at the ceiling. Harry, she said gently, sitting beside him. He turned his head toward her, his expression blank at first. Then his brow furrowed in faint recognition. You, he whispered. Yes, love. It's me. Meghan. A faint smile crossed his lips. You look like someone I used to know. Meghan's chest ached as she forced a reassuring smile. I'm still here, and I'm not going anywhere. Harry's eyes began to glaze over again, slipping back into that fog that had become his new reality. Meanwhile, Charles and William sat together in the hospital courtyard. Neither spoke for a long while, the silence between them heavy with unspoken regrets. I can't stop thinking about what the doctor said, William murmured finally. About trauma and stress. I keep asking myself if I could have done more to protect him. Charles sighed deeply. I was too harsh on him. Too hard. Always pushing him to be strong, to be dutiful. I didn't realize how much pain he was carrying inside. William looked down, his voice breaking. I thought he was just being dramatic when he left the family. I thought he wanted attention. But now, he trailed off, unable to finish. Charles put a hand on his son's shoulder. It's not too late to make it right. He's still here. We must show him that. Even if he forgets us, we'll never forget him. Later that evening, Meghan spoke quietly with the team of specialists. If his memories are slipping away, is there any way to help him hold on to them? She asked. One doctor nodded slowly. Familiar voices, photographs, and routine can sometimes help trigger memory recall. But this is not permanent. It might only provide fleeting moments of clarity. So Meghan set about filling Harry's room with photos, their wedding day, the births of Archie and Lilibet, candid snapshots of Harry laughing with friends. She played recordings of his mother Diana's voice and softly sang lullabies to him, songs they had once sung together to their children. The next morning, as William entered Harry's room, he found his brother staring at an old photo of the two of them in their childhood years. Wills, Harry said faintly. William's eyes widened. Yes, Harry. It's me. For a brief moment, Harry's face lit up with recognition. You were always the serious one, Harry said, a faint grin tugging at his lips. William laughed through his tears. And you were always the reckless one. Some things never change. But just as quickly, Harry's expression went blank again. Who are you? He asked softly. William felt his heart shatter. As the day wore on, Meghan watched from the doorway as Charles sat by Harry's bed, holding his son's hand and whispering stories from his childhood. You loved climbing trees in the garden, Charles said, his voice shaking. You gave your mother and me so many scares. But you always came down with that cheeky grin. Harry's lips curved slightly, though it wasn't clear if he understood. Later that evening, as Meghan lay awake in a hospital cot, she pulled out her journal and wrote. The doctors call this a neurological condition, but it feels like watching someone's soul being erased. I don't know how much longer he'll know me, but I'll keep reminding him every day he's Harry, he's loved, and he's not alone. She closed the journal, her eyes burning with tears. No matter what happens, I'll be here, until his very last memory fades. That night, as the royal family gathered once more around Harry's bed, the reality of the diagnosis settled over them like a heavy fog. It wasn't just Harry's battle anymore, it was theirs too. And as Meghan whispered softly in Harry's ear, hoping he could still hear her, the only sound in the room was the rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor, counting down the moments they had left. The sun had barely risen over the Montecito Hills when Meghan stepped out into the hospital courtyard. The early morning air was crisp, but she hardly noticed the chill. Her mind was heavy, clouded by the weight of everything she had kept bottled up for weeks. She clutched her phone in her hand, debating whether to make the call. For days, she had kept a brave face for Harry, for the children, even for the royal family. But now, as the reality of Harry's condition settled in like a thick fog, she felt her composure cracking. She dialed her mother. Mama, she whispered when Doria answered. Meg, are you okay? Meghan drew a shaky breath, her voice breaking. No, I'm not okay. I don't know how to do this anymore. I sit by his bed, and every day, more of him slips away. He looks at me like I'm a stranger. On the other end of the line, Doria was silent for a moment. Sweetheart, she said gently, you've been holding everything in. You don't have to do this alone. But Meghan shook her head, though her mother couldn't see it. I do, Mama. I have to. For Harry. For Archie and Lily. Hours later, Meghan stood in Harry's hospital room, her hands resting lightly on his chest as he slept. His breathing was shallow, his face pale under the dim light. She spoke softly, though she wasn't sure if he could hear her. Harry, do you remember the night we danced in the kitchen in our pajamas? It was the first time we felt like everything would be okay. You twirled me around, and we laughed until we cried. I keep playing that moment in my head because I don't know how many more memories we'll get. Her voice cracked, and she sank into the chair beside him. I promised to stand by you in sickness and in health. But I didn't think sickness would come for you like this, not so soon, not so cruelly. Later that afternoon, Meghan found herself speaking quietly to a nurse in the hallway. Sometimes he looks right through me, she admitted, tears brimming in her eyes. Yesterday, he didn't remember Archie. And today, he didn't know who I was. The nurse placed a comforting hand on Meghan's arm. Even if his mind forgets, his heart remembers, she said softly. But Meghan shook her head. He's slipping away. And I don't know how to prepare for that. That evening, Meghan sat with Harry as he stirred awake. Meg, he whispered faintly. Her heart leapt. Yes, Harry. I'm here. I'm tired, he murmured. So tired. Maybe it's time to go. Meghan's eyes filled with tears. No, she said fiercely. You can't leave us. Not yet. Archie and Lily need you. I need you. Harry gave her a weak smile. You're strong, Meg. Stronger than me. You'll be okay. Don't say that, she pleaded. We'll be okay. Together. But Harry only closed his eyes again, his breathing slowing. After Harry drifted back to sleep, Meghan walked outside and called one of her closest friends. I think I'm losing him, she said, her voice shaking. I can't do this. I thought I was strong enough, but watching him fade like this, it's breaking me. Her friend's voice was steady but gentle. You've been strong for everyone else. Maybe it's time you let yourself fall apart for a moment. Meghan sank onto a bench, burying her face in her hands. I love him so much, she whispered. But I don't know how to love someone who's forgetting me day by day. As night fell, Meghan returned to Harry's bedside. She took his hand and began to speak softly, as though telling him a bedtime story. Do you remember the promise we made on our wedding day? That no matter what the world threw at us, we'd face it together? I'm still keeping that promise, Harry. Even if you can't remember me, I'll remember for both of us. Tears streamed down her face as she placed a gentle kiss on his forehead. You're my whole heart, she whispered. And I'll love you, even when you don't know my name. That night, as Meghan lay awake in the hospital cot, she made a quiet confession to herself. If he goes, I don't know how I'll survive it, but I have to be strong. For him, for our children, for the memories he can't hold on to anymore. And for the first time since Harry's diagnosis, Meghan let herself cry freely, the sound muffled against her pillow as she grieved the man she loved, though he was still breathing just a few feet away. The hospital room was silent except for the steady beeping of the heart monitor. Outside, the California sun filtered through half-drawn blinds, casting long shadows across the floor. Meghan sat beside Harry, holding his hand as if her grip alone could keep him anchored to this world. She hadn't slept in over 24 hours, afraid that if she closed her eyes, she might miss the last flicker of the man she loved. Harry stirred faintly, his lips parting as he mumbled something incoherent. Meghan leaned closer, her breath catching. Harry? I'm here. It's Meghan. His eyelids fluttered open. For a moment, there was clarity in his eyes, like a window thrown open after a storm. Meg, he whispered. A rush of relief flooded through her. Yes, love. It's me. Harry's fingers twitched in her grasp. I need you to promise me something, he said weakly. Anything, Meghan replied, her voice trembling. Don't let them bury me near them, he murmured. Meghan blinked in confusion. Harry, what are you talking about? His eyes darted toward the ceiling, glassy and distant. When it's over. I don't want to rest there. Not near them. Too much pain. Too many ghosts. Meghan's heart clenched. Please, Harry, don't talk like that. You're going to get better. But Harry shook his head faintly, tears pooling at the corners of his eyes. You and the kids. Find somewhere quiet. Somewhere safe. and don't let them pull you back into that life. Later that afternoon, Meghan stepped into the hallway, still reeling from Harry's words. William was waiting there, pacing nervously. "How is he?" William asked, his voice tight. Meghan hesitated. He's lucid sometimes, but it's getting harder for him to hold on." William rubbed a hand over his face, struggling to keep his composure. "I need to speak to him. Alone." Meghan nodded. "He's been asking about you. I think he wants you to hear something before." Her voice trailed off. "Before it's too late." William entered Harry's room and froze in the doorway. His brother looked so small lying there, his once strong frame reduced to frailty. "Harry," William said softly. Harry turned his head, his eyes flickering with faint recognition. "Wills," he whispered. "Yes, it's me." William sat down and took Harry's hand. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice cracking. "For everything. I let too much time go by." Harry managed a weak smile. "You were always the serious one," he murmured. "And I was always the mess." "You were never a mess," William said firmly. "You were my brother. You still are." Harry's fingers tightened slightly around William's. "Promise me something," Harry whispered. "Anything. Look after them. Meghan and the kids. If I don't make it." William's breath caught. "You will make it." But Harry only shook his head faintly. "Promise me, Wills." "I promise," William said, tears running down his face. Meanwhile, King Charles sat in the hospital chapel, his head bowed in prayer. For years, he and Harry had been at odds, their relationship strained by distance, misunderstanding, and pride. "Please," Charles whispered, his voice breaking. "Give me one more chance to tell him I'm sorry. One more chance to be his father." As night fell, Meghan returned to Harry's room. He was asleep again, his chest rising and falling in shallow breaths. She sat down beside him and pulled out her journal. "Harry asked me to promise him something today," she wrote. "He doesn't want to be buried near his family. He said there were too many ghosts. It broke me to hear him say that. But I'll honor his wishes no matter what the world thinks." She closed the journal and brushed a tear from her cheek. "I'll protect your legacy, Harry," she whispered, "even if you're not here to see it." That night, as the royal family gathered around Harry's bed, the weight of his request hung over them like a dark cloud. It was a plea born of pain, of years spent trying to find peace in a world that had never truly let him go. And as Meghan held his hand, she whispered softly in his ear, "Wherever you go, Harry, you'll never be alone. I'll make sure of it." The news broke just after midnight in London. A single headline flashed across screens around the world, setting social media ablaze within minutes. "Prince Harry gravely ill. Family flies to California as doctors warn of memory loss." At first, many thought it was yet another unfounded rumor. But as royal correspondents confirmed details from multiple sources, the truth hit like a thunderclap. Prince Harry was fighting for his life, and the world might be witnessing the final chapters of a story that began in fairy tale splendor. In Montecito, a line of news vans began assembling outside the private hospital where Harry was being treated. Reporters spoke in hushed tones, aware of the gravity of the situation. Sources close to the Sussex family tell us Prince Harry's condition is deteriorating rapidly, one journalist reported live on air. Doctors are describing it as an aggressive neurological disorder that has left the Duke of Sussex struggling to recognize even his closest loved ones. Fans gathered in small groups, holding candles and handmade signs that read, "We love you, Harry, and stay strong, Duke." Across the ocean, in the streets of London, mourners laid flowers and cards outside Buckingham Palace. A soft rain fell as strangers embraced, united in shared grief for a prince they had watched grow from a mischievous boy into a soldier, a husband, and a father. "I feel like I'm losing a brother," one tearful woman told a reporter. "Harry's always been the heart of this family. It's too soon for this to be happening." In the press, opinion pieces flooded the airwaves and digital platforms. Some blamed the relentless tabloid culture for Harry's decline. "We hounded this man for decades," one columnist wrote. "We mocked his pain, questioned his choices, and turned his life into entertainment. Now we're watching the consequences play out in real time." Others turned their focus to Meghan. Supporters praised her for standing by Harry's side during his darkest hour. Critics, however, continued to cast suspicion, reigniting old debates about her influence over him. At Buckingham Palace, officials scrambled to craft a public statement. King Charles had insisted on keeping Harry's condition private for as long as possible, But the global media storm made silence impossible. A somber announcement was released later that morning. Their Majesties the King and Queen, alongside the Prince and Princess of Wales, have traveled to the United States to be by the Duke of Sussex's side during this difficult time. The royal family thanks the public for their prayers and requests privacy as they navigate this deeply personal matter. The message sparked an outpouring of sympathy across social media. In Los Angeles, celebrities and activists who had worked with Harry began posting messages of support. Serena Williams wrote, "Harry, you've always been a fighter. Sending love and prayers to you and Meghan." Elton John posted a photo of himself with Harry and the late Princess Diana, captioning it, "My heart is breaking. Stay strong, dear boy." Even some of Harry's harshest critics softened their tone. Piers Morgan, who had clashed with the Sussexes for years, tweeted, "This is tragic news. Whatever differences existed, I wish Harry peace and strength in this fight." Meanwhile, in Montecito, Meghan kept vigil at Harry's bedside. Nurses entered and exited quietly, their faces grave. "They're all praying for you out there," she whispered to Harry, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. "People all over the world. You've touched so many lives, Harry. You're not just my husband, you're their prince too." For a fleeting moment, Harry's eyes flickered open. He stared at Meghan, confusion clouding his gaze. "Why are they crying?" he murmured. "Because they love you," Meghan replied softly. "Just like I do." As night fell again over California, the hospital's security detail tightened. Word had spread that King Charles and Prince William were staying in a private wing nearby. Inside the hospital, the atmosphere was heavy with the knowledge that the coming days could bring heartbreak. And yet, amidst the sorrow, there was a sense of unity too. For the first time in years, the fractured royal family stood together, not as monarchs, heirs, or exiles, but as a family fighting to hold on to one of their own. In homes around the globe, millions of people sat glued to their televisions, their phones buzzing with updates. "Stay with us, Harry," one Twitter user posted, the words quickly shared tens of thousands of times. Hashtags like #PrayForHarry and #WeLoveHarry trended worldwide. Meghan stepped outside briefly for air. A small crowd of well-wishers across the street called out to her softly, "Stay strong, Duchess. We're praying for your family." Meghan placed a hand over her heart and gave a faint nod. Her voice caught in her throat as she whispered, almost to herself, "He's always been strong for others. Now I have to be strong for him." The world was watching, waiting, hoping. But deep inside the hospital, as Harry slept surrounded by his family, the question lingered in every heart. Would the prince who had captured the world's imagination ever return to them? Or were they witnessing the slow, painful goodbye of a man who had given everything to find peace? The air in the hospital room felt thick, heavy with the weight of unspoken words. Meghan sat motionless in the chair beside Harry's bed, her fingers intertwined with his. The rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor seemed louder in the silence, a constant reminder that time was slipping away. She studied his face, the sharp jawline, the faint freckles, the lips that once curled into a boyish grin, and wondered how much longer she would be able to hold on to this version of him before the disease erased it all. Harry stirred slightly, his eyelids fluttering open. "Meg," he whispered, his voice hoarse and fragile. "I'm here, love. I'm right here." He looked at her for a moment, a flicker of recognition crossing his tired eyes. "You're my wife?" he asked hesitantly. "Yes," Meghan said, forcing a smile as tears threatened to spill. "I'm your wife. And you're my everything." Harry's lips trembled. I don't want you to watch me disappear." Meghan shook her head, gripping his hand tighter. "Don't say that. You're still here. You're still my Harry." But deep down, she knew he wasn't, not entirely. Every day, she watched as pieces of him slipped away like sand through her fingers. Later that afternoon, Meghan stepped out into the hallway, her legs weak beneath her. Doria was waiting there, her expression etched with concern. "You need to rest," Doria urged gently. "I can't," Meghan replied, her voice breaking. "What if I'm not there when he needs me? What if I miss his last lucid moment?" Doria pulled her daughter into an embrace. "You've been carrying this alone for too long. Harry wouldn't want you to break yourself for him." Meghan shook her head, burying her face in her mother's shoulder. "He asked me to promise I'd protect the kids, that I'd keep them away from the royal family. He doesn't even want to be buried near them." Doria stroked Meghan's hair. "Then you honor his wishes, Meg. You make sure his voice is heard, even if he can't speak for himself anymore." As night fell, Meghan returned to Harry's room. She found William sitting at his brother's bedside, holding his hand. "He's been asking for you," William said softly. Meghan nodded, her eyes glistening. "Thank you for coming," she whispered. William looked down at Harry, his jaw tight. "I wasn't here when he needed me most. I can't undo that. But I can be here now." Meghan placed a hand on William's shoulder. "He knows you're here. Even if he can't say it, I think he feels it." Later, Meghan sat alone with Harry. She pulled out a small leather-bound journal and began writing a letter. "My dearest Harry, if there comes a day when you no longer remember me, I want you to know this. You have been loved fiercely and endlessly. You are the father of my children, the keeper of my heart, and the bravest man I have ever known. If you forget my face, I'll remind you every morning. If you forget our life, I'll tell you our story again and again until my voice gives out. And even if you forget everything else, I will never forget you. Asterisk." She closed the journal, placing it in the drawer beside his bed. The next morning, Harry woke briefly and turned his head toward Meghan. "Meg," he whispered. "Yes, my love. I'm so tired." Meghan's eyes filled with tears, but she kept her voice steady. "Then rest. I'll be here when you wake up." Harry gave a faint smile. "Promise me. You'll be happy, even without me." Meghan's chest ached as she kissed his forehead. "I promise to try, but you'll always have my heart." As Harry drifted back into sleep, Meghan whispered softly in his ear. "You can let go if you need to, but know this, you are enough. You'll always be enough." And for the first time, she allowed herself to imagine a world without him. Not because she wanted to, but because she had to prepare for the moment he was no longer hers to hold. That evening, Meghan stood at the window overlooking the hospital gardens. The sky burned with the colors of sunset, deep oranges and purples swirling like a painting. "He won't make it," she said aloud, the words tasting bitter on her tongue. But even as the tears fell, Meghan made herself a quiet vow. "I will carry him with me, in our children's laughter, in every memory I keep alive, in every breath I take." It wasn't goodbye, not yet, but it felt close enough to shatter her. The hospital room was unnervingly quiet that morning. Even the usual hum of the machines seemed softer, subdued, as though the world itself was holding its breath. Meghan sat motionless by Harry's bedside, her hand resting gently on his chest. His breathing had grown shallower through the night, each rise and fall more delicate than the last. In the hallway, the royal family gathered in a tense silence. King Charles, William, and even Camilla stood as though frozen in time. Doria sat off to one side, her hands folded in her lap, her eyes closed as she whispered prayers under her breath. The doctors had warned them, this could be the day. Earlier that morning, Meghan had spoken with Harry during one of his brief moments of clarity. His voice had been faint, but there was still a trace of determination in it. "Meg," he murmured. "Yes, Harry," she replied softly, leaning close. I don't want them to see me like this." "They're your family," Meghan said gently. "They want to be here." Harry's eyes fluttered open, glassy and tired. Too much damage, too many words left unsaid. Meghan squeezed his hand. "It's not too late. They're here now. You don't have to carry it alone anymore." Harry's lips trembled into a faint smile. "Promise me, you'll keep them safe. Archie, Lily, don't let them get lost, like I did." "I promise," Meghan whispered, her tears falling freely. In the hallway, William stared at the floor, his hands shoved deep into his pockets. "I don't know what to say to him," he admitted to his father. "After everything we've been through, how do I say goodbye?" Charles placed a hand on his son's shoulder, his own eyes red and weary. "You don't need to find perfect words," Charles said quietly. "You just need to be there." Later that afternoon, Meghan stepped out of the room, giving William and Charles a chance to sit with Harry alone. William approached the bed cautiously, his heart pounding. "Harry," he said softly. "It's me. It's William." Harry's eyes opened slightly, and for a brief, fleeting moment, they seemed to brighten. "Wills," he murmured. "Yes, it's me," William replied, choking back tears. Harry's hand twitched weakly in his brother's grasp. "Sorry," Harry whispered, "for leaving like this." William shook his head, tears streaming down his cheeks. "No, I'm sorry. For everything. I should have been there for you, and I wasn't. But I'm here now." Harry managed a faint smile. "Always my brother. Always," William whispered. Charles stepped forward then, his voice thick with emotion. "My boy," he said softly. "I was never good at saying the things a father should say. But I am proud of you, Harry. I've always been proud. Harry blinked slowly, his lips moving faintly. Mom would be proud too, he whispered. Charles felt a sharp pang in his chest. Yes, she would, he replied, his voice breaking. As night approached, Meghan returned to the room. The doctors had adjusted Harry's medication to keep him comfortable. His breathing had grown shallower, each exhale a delicate whisper. Meghan leaned close to his ear. It's okay, my love, she whispered. You don't have to fight anymore. We'll be okay. I'll make sure the children remember you. The real you. Harry's lips moved ever so slightly. Don't let them bury me there, he murmured. I won't, Meghan promised, clutching his hand. I'll keep you safe. Even now. Hours later, as the stars emerged in the California sky, the family gathered around Harry's bed. Meghan stroked his hair softly, humming a lullaby she used to sing to Archie. And then, with a long, shallow breath, Harry fell still. The monitor flatlined, the sound piercing the room like a blade. Meghan's hand flew to her mouth as a sob escaped her. William turned away, his shoulders shaking. Charles buried his face in his hands, silent tears falling onto the floor. In the days that followed, the world reacted in shock and grief. Vigils sprang up outside Buckingham Palace and across cities worldwide. People lit candles, placed flowers, and whispered prayers for the prince who had fought to live life on his own terms. In a brief public statement, Meghan spoke through her tears. He was my best friend, my partner, and the father of my children. And though he's no longer with us, his love will live on in Archie's smile, in Lily's laughter, and in the hearts of all who knew him. Back in Montecito, Meghan stood in the garden as the sun set. Archie and Lilibet played nearby, unaware of the full weight of their loss. You'll never be forgotten, Harry, she whispered to the sky. Not by me. Not by them. Not by the world. She closed her eyes, feeling the breeze brush her cheeks like a gentle kiss. And though the pain in her heart felt endless, she took her first deep breath in days, whispering to herself the words she had promised Harry. We'll be okay. I'll make sure of it. The world seemed to stand still in the days after Prince Harry's passing. Across continents, millions of people struggled to comprehend the loss of a man who had been born into unimaginable privilege yet carried a pain that resonated far beyond palace walls. From candlelit vigils in London to floral memorials in California, strangers gathered not because Harry was a prince, but because he had dared to be human. In Montecito, Meghan sat in the quiet of their garden, watching Archie and Lilibet chase each other through the grass. Their laughter was a balm, but every giggle also carried a sting. She thought about all the moments Harry would never witness, their first lost teeth, their awkward teenage years, their wedding days. He should be here, she whispered to herself, her voice catching. Doria came outside carrying 2 mugs of tea. She placed one in front of Meghan and sat beside her. You've been carrying the weight of the world, Meg, Doria said gently. But now it's time to let Harry's love carry you. Meghan nodded, staring into the steaming cup. He asked me to be strong, to be happy for the kids. But how do I fill the hole he's left behind? Doria took her daughter's hand. By living. By making sure his children know the man he was. The man he wanted to be. Meanwhile, in London, King Charles and Prince William struggled to come to terms with their own grief. At a private memorial in Windsor Castle, Charles addressed a small gathering of family and staff. My son was many things: brave, rebellious, compassionate. He sought peace, but too often the world denied him that. My only comfort is knowing he found love in Meghan, and that together they built a family full of joy. Charles paused, his voice trembling. I will spend the rest of my days honoring his memory and ensuring his children always know where they come from. William, too, had been deeply shaken. In a rare moment of public vulnerability, he spoke to reporters outside Kensington Palace. Harry wasn't just my brother. He was my best friend in our younger years. We drifted apart later, and I regret every day we spent in silence. But in his final moments, we found our way back to each other. I will carry that reconciliation for the rest of my life. In Montecito, Meghan began making arrangements in accordance with Harry's final wishes. There would be no grand royal burial, no place in Westminster Abbey alongside his ancestors. Instead, Harry was laid to rest in a small, secluded grove near the sea. A spot he had once called his sanctuary. Only Meghan, the children, and a handful of close friends attended. As the waves crashed softly against the shore, Meghan read aloud a letter she had written for Harry. You asked me to promise I'd protect our family. I will. You asked me to promise I'd keep your memory alive. I will. And you asked me to promise I'd be happy, even without you. I don't know how yet, but for you I'll try. She placed the letter atop his simple wooden coffin, her tears falling freely. The weeks that followed were a blur. Meghan spent her nights writing in her journal, capturing every memory of Harry she could summon. His laugh, his terrible cooking attempts, the way he cradled their newborns as if they were made of glass. One evening, Archie crawled into her lap, holding a photo of Harry. "Will Daddy come home soon?" he asked softly. Meghan hugged him tightly, her tears soaking his hair. "Daddy's in your heart now," she whispered. "And in mine. He'll always be with us, Archie. Always." Back in the UK, the royal family began a new chapter, one colored by loss and reflection. William and Charles met privately to discuss how they could support Meghan and the children going forward. "They're part of this family," Charles said firmly. "No matter what's happened before, we owe it to Harry to be there for them." William nodded in agreement. "Archie and Lily will know they're loved. That's what Harry would have wanted." Months later, Meghan released a heartfelt statement to the public. Harry lived a life filled with adventure, laughter, and above all, love. Though his time was cut short, his legacy lives on in his children and in the countless lives he touched around the world. "He taught me how to be brave. And now, I will teach our children how to live with courage too." The story of Harry's final days wasn't one of bitterness or division, but of healing. In those fragile, fleeting moments, old wounds had been soothed, and love had triumphed over pain. On what would have been Harry's birthday, Meghan and the children walked down to the secluded grove where he was buried. Archie carried a small bouquet of wildflowers. "Happy birthday, Daddy," he said softly. Lilibet, too young to understand fully, placed her tiny hand on the headstone. Meghan knelt between them, her arms around their small shoulders. "Daddy loved you so much," she whispered. "And he'd want you to remember that love every single day." As the sun dipped below the horizon, Meghan felt a gentle breeze brush her cheek, almost like a kiss. And for the first time since Harry's death, she allowed herself a small, fragile smile.